Have you ever wondered if being good with money is actually a hard science, kind of like physics or engineering, or if it's, well, something entirely different? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're not going to stare at spreadsheets, dissect stock charts, or memorize complex formulas. Instead, we're actually going to look in the mirror. We're approaching this material from a totally different angle. We're treating money not just as an asset you manage, but almost like a blank canvas. It's a canvas where we project our deepest insecurities, our childhood experiences, and yeah, our egos. So let's dive right in.
To really show you what I mean, let's start with a crazy story straight from the source. The author talks about working at this high-end hotel in Los Angeles, and there was this regular guest who was a brilliant young tech executive. This guy was a literal genius. He had invented and patented a crucial component for Wi-Fi routers in his 20s, and he was wildly successful. But his relationship with money, it was this incredibly toxic mix of deep insecurity and just childish foolishness. He'd walk around carrying a stack of $100 bills literally inches thick, showing it off to absolutely anyone who would look his way. And one day, he actually bought thousands of dollars worth of gold coins, took his friends out to the dock, and just threw them into the Pacific Ocean. Why? Just to see who could skip them the furthest across the water. Just for fun. And you guessed it, he went bankrupt shortly after. So you have to ask yourself, how does a certified genius do something so incredibly absurd?
Well, that story perfectly illustrates the core premise of what we're looking at today. You see, we're totally conditioned to think of money as a hard skill. We treat it like a realm dominated by math, interest rates, and technical data. We kind of convince ourselves that if we just learn the exact right formula, boom, we'll be rich. But the reality is actually the opposite. Money is heavily dictated by soft skills. It's all about psychology, behavior, and human emotion. You could literally be the smartest engineer on the planet, but if you can't control your own psychological urges, you are going to fail.
So, to completely rewire how we view our own finances, we're going to break down 5 major mental shifts. We'll start with behavioral science, realize why no one is actually crazy, look at the social comparison trap, contrast getting rich with staying rich, and finally, redefine what wealth actually is.
All right, let's jump right into our first mental shift. Behavioral science, not math. We really need to stop treating finance like it's physics.
Just think about the 2008 financial crisis for a second. For decades, the finance industry has recruited the absolute brightest minds from the top universities around the world. Financial engineering is a massively popular field of study. We have the most highly educated, brilliant people building these unbelievably complex financial models. And yet, despite all that brain power, they still caused the worst financial collapse in 80 years. Why is that? If finance is just math, why couldn't the smartest minds in the room solve it?
The answer, which the text beautifully highlights with a quote from Voltaire, is that history never repeats, man always does. The stock market isn't governed by the clean, predictable laws of physics. It's governed by the incredibly messy, wildly unpredictable reality of human biology. It's driven by our history, our greed, our insecurities, and our blind optimism. When we try to solve money problems using math, we fail, because money problems are actually human behavior problems.
Which brings us to our second mental shift. No one is crazy. This one is entirely about empathy.
When you watch how other people spend their money, it is so easy to judge them and think they're being completely irrational. But the truth is, nobody is actually crazy. Just think about the massive difference in perspective between someone who grew up in extreme poverty versus the child of a wealthy banker. They think about risk in ways that the other person simply cannot comprehend, no matter how hard they try. The crazy thing is, your personal experiences with money make up maybe a tiny fraction of a percent of what has actually happened in the world, but those exact same experiences dictate about 80% of how you think the world works.
Every single financial decision someone makes is completely justified in their own head by their unique mental model. Take lottery tickets, for example. The lowest income households actually spend significantly more on lottery tickets than anyone else. Now, to a wealthy person, that seems like absolutely crazy math. Why waste the money? But to someone struggling just to survive, they aren't actually buying a mathematical probability. They are purchasing a dream. They're buying a brief feeling of hope that wealthy people already get to live out every single day. So it's not crazy. It makes perfect sense within their unique psychological worldview.
Okay, moving on to our third mental shift, the social comparison trap. This tackles one of the most dangerous psychological traps that exists.
The text brings up these really tragic cautionary tales of extremely wealthy figures, guys like Bernie Madoff and Rajat Gupta. These were men who already had hundreds of millions of dollars. They literally had everything. Yet they still committed massive fraud. But why? Because they couldn't stop looking at the billionaires right above them. They risked what they had and what they desperately needed just to get money they absolutely did not have and, quite frankly, did not need. Like Bill Gates points out, success is actually a terrible teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. When you play the game of trying to keep up with the wealth of others, you are playing a biological game that just cannot be won.
So the absolutely crucial point here is learning to cultivate a deep, profound sense of one simple word: enough. Happiness, as the text notes, is really just results minus expectations. And here's the secret: enough isn't a tiny amount. Enough is simply realizing that an endless appetite for more will eventually push you right over the edge into profound regret. The only real way to win is to just refuse to fight that social comparison battle in the first place.
Let's transition to our fourth shift: getting rich versus staying rich, because acquiring money and keeping it require two entirely different mindsets.
Think about it like this. Getting rich usually requires taking some risks, being super optimistic, and really putting yourself out there. But staying rich, that requires the exact opposite. It requires frugality, a healthy dose of paranoia, and a humble acceptance that your past luck doesn't guarantee your future success. The source actually argues that the most powerful financial book ever written wouldn't be full of complex trading strategies. No, it would just be titled "Shut Up and Wait." Compounding isn't just some boring math formula. It's a brutal psychological test of human endurance. It's all about surviving long enough for the math to finally work out in your favor.
And survival is so critical because of a concept known as tails. We're talking about the absolute extremes of a distribution curve. Whether you're looking at a high-end art collection or a massive stock portfolio, a tiny 1% sliver of your decisions will account for almost all of your lifelong success. You can literally be wrong half the time and still make an absolute fortune. You just have to survive the 99% of normal, mundane, or even bad decisions to make sure you're still sitting at the table when that 1% tail event finally happens.
Now, let's head into our fifth and final shift: wealth is your time. Here, we're completely redefining what the ultimate goal of money actually is.
Why is it that so many highly paid investment bankers, people pulling in millions of dollars a year, are chronically miserable? Well, psychologists have a word for it: reactance. It's that deep-seated anger and frustration we all feel when we feel like we've lost control over our own lives. The text makes this incredibly profound observation: the highest dividend money ever pays is the ability to wake up every single morning and say, "I can do whatever I want today." Those miserable bankers, they have tons of money, sure, but they have zero control over their time. Because of that, they aren't truly wealthy.
This leads to a realization that might just be the most powerful takeaway in this entire explainer. Saving money is simply the gap between your ego and your income. When you finally realize that spending money just to show other people how much money you have is the absolute fastest way to have less money, your entire worldview shifts. Saving isn't a math problem. It's a daily, psychological battle against the human instinct to expand your peacock feathers to their absolute limit.
True wealth is actually what you don't see. It's the luxury car you didn't buy. It's the first-class ticket you decided to downgrade to economy. It's the diamond watch you left sitting in the store display case. Wealth is the financial assets that haven't yet been converted into the physical stuff that everyone else sees. Why? Because keeping that money unspent gives you the highest return on investment possible. It gives you total, undeniable control over your own time and your own future.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty stark question to chew on. Take a hard look at your own life, your bank account, your daily desires. Are you managing your money using math, or are you really just feeding a psychological urge? Is your spending today genuinely controlled by your actual needs, or is it secretly being controlled by your ego? Think about it.